Today, let's talk about buying properties in Portugal. We've gone through the process several times, so we have some suggestions of things to consider before pulling that trigger and avoiding you massive headaches. So let's jump into them. The first one is the price point. You need to be aware if you're coming from abroad with a larger purchasing power than local folks in Portugal. Some prices might seem to you very accessible, but there is something to pay attention, which is for some reason you decide you don't want that property anymore, you want to put it in the market, you already bought it at a very high price. So that's my advice. Really look into that price and see if it's the the market price at that instance in that region. And also if it makes sense, because let's say you're looking outside Lisbon, Porto, Coimbra, the big cities, smaller regions, and still you find the prices a little high, that's something to pay attention, because you might invest and buy that house, but then when you want to sell it, nobody wants to pay that amount. I mean, the locals have no buying power for those values. So that's something to pay attention. That's something we've experienced in the region where we are, in a specific city, that prices were super inflated due to a lack of construction at that moment. But those prices, Portuguese families can't afford it. It's way too expensive. So we decided, no, we're not going to be paying those prices because they are not reality. And when you wait, opportunities show up. You just need to be patient. Do not jump at that first thing you see, because you might be paying much more than you should. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to show some love to the YouTube algorithm, and you do that by subscribing and liking this video. On the other side of the coin is when you find dirt cheap properties and you're like, oh man, score, I found in this remote region or in this small city this really super cheap property. Watch out. We have a saying in Portuguese, o barato sai caro. What is cheap ends up being more expensive, and we have a reason for that saying exactly for this example. Just the other day, we were looking for an investment in property, and we saw something that is well located, is very centric in a nice city, and they were asking us for around, I think, between 50,000 to 60,000 euros. And we thought, okay, that seems like a okay price just for the location itself. But then we went to see the house, and I mean, from the outside it looked pretty decent, but when you entered, you saw that it was a freaking mess. The divisions, the rooms were all messy, the walls were not aligned. It was a freaking messing show. So that was not worth it, because it could be cheap, but it would cost us around 100,000 thrown into that to solve issues. Plus, we will probably need to legalize things that were not legal, meaning that they built stuff that they didn't legalize with the Câmara Municipal, and now that you want to do such drastic changes, you need to legalize, and that's going to cost you more money. So be aware of those dirt cheap properties you sometimes find online. They seem appealing, but they can turn out to be money pits where you just throw money and you probably end up with a not so good property on the very end. So let's say you found your property, the price looks good, you're ready to pull that trigger. Wait a minute. Get an inspector to take a look at that property. You're making an investment of thousands of euros. Why not spend 1,000 more and get someone to take a look at it with your interest in mind? In US, that's very normal, but here, nobody seems to do it, and it's a huge mistake, because first of all, you can get negotiating power. Let's say you find something really ugly, you can push down that price. Or maybe you find a deal breaker, maybe you give away this business and a lot of headaches in the future. So that's something truly to consider. In Portuguese, we have this saying, which is comprar gato por lebre, which means you're buying a cat and you thought you were buying a bunny. And that's what can happen because you're going in, you're enthusiastic, you love this property, you believe it's what your dream house, but it might have some hidden nightmares in there. And I have several examples. I had one friend that bought an amazing property, what it looked like an amazing property in the Cascais region, only to find out a couple of months later that the house was full of mold and it had massive infiltrations. What happened there? The seller just threw in some paint to cover all those issues, but if he had an inspector, he has tools which can detect levels of humidity and understand what's going on. The other one that happened, and this one is really unfortunate because I wouldn't even think about doing this, but now I've added it to my list of things to pay attention, which is other friends bought a property and a month later they were getting a letter from Câmara Municipal de Lisboa asking them to do renovations to the apartment above them. And they were like, wait a minute, what? So the previous owner sold them a property they had disputes with the person above, and Câmara Municipal was involved. And when they get involved, you bet that money starts flowing out of your wallet to solve and to pay fines. So these are things to pay attention. And when you bring an inspector, a civil engineer, a builder, someone that understands construction, can spot these pitfalls, they can save you headaches and thousands of euros. So that is a key advice, inspector. The last pitfall I want to talk to you about is be aware of buying properties with tenants in it, because you might think it's giving you a discount on the price, but they might give you some massive headaches. First of all, you need to understand what type of contract you have at hands, because contracts have renewal times, and if you don't intervene, it keeps renewing. And the other one is that you really need to take it to a lawyer that specializes in rental agreements. Not any lawyer knows all the elements and dynamics and knows the Código Civil for that. So take it to the right person. If you want to know who I use for all my legal matters, I really can talk wonders about this association. They've been extremely helpful. Let me know in the comments and I'll tell you this association that really can help you on all the rental agreements and give you legal support. And you also need to be aware to a specific situation that if it happens, you have at your hands a contract until the end of the life of the tenant, which what I call the worst type of contract you can have. And that can happen in several situations. First of all is if the tenant has been there for 20 years, plus he's 65 years old, boom, you have a tenant for life. The other one is if your tenant has a 60% disability that needs to be verified by doctors. So there's actually a document given by doctors that certify the disability. If it has that disability, bam, you have a rental for life. This is really important because many properties are sold in Portugal at massive discounts and they have tenants. But then when you go looking into the details, you find, oh man, yeah, it is cheap because this tenant is basically until the end of life, and you don't want to wish bad ill for anybody, but you do the math, right? If this person has 60 years, maybe it has a little bit more, 20 years of life or 30, who knows? There's some people that live until 110, so you really need to watch out for those types of properties because they look very sexy, but they can be a total nightmare. So here you go, those are our top advices and things to pay attention when you're looking at properties. So where are you? Are you looking at properties in Portugal? Are you in the purchasing process? Let us know down in the comments, and also as well with other questions you have on this process. As we mentioned, we've gone through this a couple of times, so we have some experience and we wouldn't mind sharing. So until the very next time.